Welcome to Detroit. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes. I will beat your ass. You can drown them. And that's what we gotta be. That's who we have to be. Because that's our domain. That is our domain. Because we'll tread water as long as it takes to fucking bury you.
Takes the snap, turns, gives to Montgomery, right side, end zone, touchdown, Detroit Lions! Yes.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions friends, fans, and family members. Welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike. And as always, we're diving on in. So, folks, we're going to have a couple of conversations over the course of this week. We're going to have to, take our lumps. We're going to have a hard pill to swallow because we're going to have to deal with the aftermath of what happened in terms of the game yesterday against the Packers. It was a bitter disappointment. It was a real disappointment because, you know what? The Lions got bullied yesterday. The Lions got outplayed. They got outmanned. They got out-executed by the Green Bay Packers. That's literally what happened. And you know what? We got our asses kicked. It's that simple. There's no simpler way to put it. There's no way to try and skirt around it. That's exactly what happened. And I'm going to make sure I put this out there first and foremost. You know what? There were some of the things that I said I was wrong about. I was dead wrong about. I was wrong about thinking that our offensive line was going to be able to perform a lot better than what it did in terms of against the Packers. I was wrong in thinking that we were going to be able to win and that we were going to be able to win convincingly. I was wrong about a couple of things. And you know what? I am not at all, as I've said before in the past, impervious to being wrong. So when I'm wrong, I'll admit when I'm wrong. I'll eat my crow. I'll eat it. Definitely don't like it, but I'll eat it. And I'll take, the fact that I was wrong. I won't be a sore loser. And I will admit when I'm wrong. And I'll take the loss in being wrong. And I'll do so with dignity. I'm not going to throw a temper tantrum. Because number one, that doesn't do me any good. And number two, it's really immature. What I will say is this. When you take a look at that loss for what it was, obviously, when you get done with the loss and it's just happened, your emotions are still running high, and you're taking a look at everything as far as the immediate after fact, you're not going to look at things nearly as clearly once you've had a chance to self-reflect. You're not going to have a chance to, step back from the emotion of everything, what's just happened, and you're not going to be able to view things with the correct perspective of what you should have. Because let's call it for what it is. Immediate aftermath of the entirety of that game, everybody is doing what they always do in terms of Lions fans, in terms of Lions media, in terms of national media. They're looking for a scapegoat. They're looking for someone to blame, and they are doing their absolute best to find someone to blame. And the Lions faithful, some of them have already found someone that they're going to blame. The media has already found the people who they're going to blame. Other fans have already found who they're going to blame. And you know what? They can have who they're going to blame. They can point the finger on whoever they're going to blame. That's fine. But I'm going to tell you this right now. One game and just saying, this is the reason why that team did not perform well, I'm sorry. That's just absolutely ludicrous. If you want to know the real reason why the Lions did not play well yesterday, why the Lions did not win yesterday, it comes down to two things, and it's all surrounded around one word: execution. Execution, execution, execution. The Packers executed their plays yesterday. They did what they were supposed to do yesterday. The Lions, they did not more often than not. The Lions had a lot of times where they simply did not execute up to the standard and expectation that they themselves have. And when the Packers got their chance to do it, they did. That is ultimately what caused the Lions to lose yesterday. The Packers had a really great game plan. They came out, they played their game plan well, they executed at a high level, and it showed. The Lions, on the other hand, they did not. And you can literally see it in a multitude of various things that happened over the course of that game. When we take a look at why the Lions offense didn't execute very well, it comes down to one simple unit that didn't play very well, and that was the offensive line. The offensive line did not execute very well, particularly the middle of the offensive line. And I know everybody's been talking about the middle of the offensive line, and they're concerned about the guards, they're concerned about Graham Glasgow. Let's call it for what it is. It came down to the two guards not playing very well, and it came down to the fact of not because they're just bad, they just didn't execute very well. Their inexperience showed up quite a great deal against the freaking Green Bay Packers. Why? Well, if you watched that game last night with any sort of, attention, any sort of clarity, any sort of actual interest in what was going on other than just this was bad, this was terrible, and blah, 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 and you're just focusing on the initial, what's going on within the play, what it came down to is that the Packers simply outperformed the Lions in terms of what they needed to do to confuse the Lions. And what I mean by that is the Packers did a lot, and I mean this, they did a lot of stunts against the Lions' offensive line yesterday, and it worked. And it worked because the Lions' interior offensive line, it didn't have the experience to deal with that. Now, everyone's going to say, well, that's not an excuse, David. It's not that it's an excuse. It's the reality of the situation. You can say what you want about how, you know what? Tate Ratledge came from the SEC. He came from Georgia. He's seen these stunts before. You're right, he has. But only on a college level. And furthermore, when he saw them when he was in college, he was on an offensive line where, everybody else was doing their job to help deal with those stunts. It's another matter altogether. It is another beast altogether when, one, you're going up against NFL level talent. Number two, it's your very first NFL game in terms of an actual regular season game, not preseason, because let's call for what it is. In the preseason, you're not running stunts. You're not running anything super complex. You're not running anything super deep. So you know what? The Lions' offensive line, those rookies, they got a full measure and taste of what teams are going to try to do against them. So it's like, okay, you've now seen what teams are going to go after. They're going to go after your inexperience. They're going to go after your how do I put this? Not just your inexperience, but your lack of knowledge of what is going to be, where you're at in regards to where other teams are at, where other defenses are at. Jeff Hafley has got a defense out there that's very, very good. It's very disciplined. They know how to run their defense, and they showed it. That defensive front gave our offensive line in the middle a whole bunch of fits, and it was apparently obvious that both Mahogany and Ratledge, they were struggling dealing with all of those stunts. And when you have two guys that are directly in the middle that are having problems dealing with all those stunts, what then happens is the other offensive linemen, they're going to start trying to compensate. They're going to start trying to help, which means, hey, you know what? Rather than fully dealing with the assignment that I know is directly in front of me, I'm going to try and help over here. I'm going to try and help with this. The problem is that the offensive line has to work as a unit. And if that unit is trying to feel like it has to compensate in other places, it's going to cause problems for that unit to overall be successful. That's why we saw the poor execution in terms of the pass blocking. That's why we saw the poor execution in terms of the run blocking. That's why our offense really sputtered, because the offensive line was having to deal with all of those stunts up front, and it couldn't get into a rhythm. Now, I know some people are going to say, well, if we had Frank Ragnow, if we had Kevin Zeitler, that wouldn't have happened. Well, no dip. Of course it wouldn't have happened because, okay, Frank Ragnow has been dealing with that for however many years before he retired. Kevin Zeitler, the same thing. But you know what? You can't use that. You want to know why you can't use it? Because they're not here. You can't talk about something that's not available or not here. Frank Ragnow retired. Trying to now have people say, oh, well, the Lions need to beg him to come back. They need to call him to come back. They need to get him back out on the field. Leave the guy alone. He's retired. He made a decision to retire. If he wants to make a decision to unretire, that's fine. But the Lions should not be calling him on the phone, begging him to come back just because, oh, you know what? We had a bad game. It wasn't because Graham Glasgow had a bad game at center. It's because the guards were having problems. And when they're having problems, the tackles and the center, they're going to try and help. But if they're always trying to help, they can't focus on what they need to do. And here's the thing. While the offensive line all plays together as a unit, they have to focus on what their individual assignment is for a particular play. If they're constantly worried about what everybody else is doing, they can't do that. So yeah, the offensive line, it showed in its inexperience in the interior, which is what caused them to have problems, not only running the ball, but also protecting Jared Goff. Because let's call it for what it is. Jared Goff was pressured through most of the game. He got sacked 4 times. That's not something we're used to seeing. And you know what? When you've got 2 brand new guys that are, making first-time starts as the full-time starters, unfortunately, that's going to happen. It's part of the learning curve. It's part of the process. It's not a process that everybody wants to deal with because they're used to seeing the success that we've had in the past. Which again goes back to, oh, we're used to seeing this. This is what we expect. Well, when you're now dealing with some new elements, you're going to have to change your expectations a little bit. You're going to have to give a little bit more grace in terms of getting through all this. So that's one thing that obviously was a problem. And I'm going to say this right now. For those that want to make the big issue about the coordinators, it wasn't necessarily the reasoning why we lost that game. The coordinators were not the reason we lost. It wasn't because John Morton wasn't opening up all these exotic plays, all these exotic looks. It wasn't because Kelvin Shepard didn't know what he was doing. Let's talk about it from the offensive perspective. The offense didn't sputter due to poor play calling. It failed due to poor execution. If your offensive line cannot hold their blocks to give Jared Goff the time to throw down the field and to do so comfortably and to make sure that, hey, you know what, I've got open receivers to throw to, then you know what, it doesn't matter what kind of plays John Morton puts in for the offense to run. Because let's understand offensive play design here for a minute. Offensive play designs are typically going to have what are known as levels in them. And what that typically means is you're typically going to have a deep receiver, you're going to have middle receivers, and you're going to have your checkdowns. Well, notice what happened virtually every single time the Lions ran an offensive pass play yesterday. Goff had to revert to throwing the checkdowns. Why? Because of 2 reasons. One, the offensive line wasn't holding up well enough to allow Goff to throw those mid shots that we're used to seeing all the damn time. And even Tony Romo during the broadcast literally said it. He's like, listen, last year, that is a play that the Lions would have absolutely executed on a mid-level pass because that is what they did. And he was saying, listen, it's not because the receiver wasn't open, it's because Goff didn't have the time. And then on top of that, you also have to take a look at how well the freaking Packers secondary played. The Packers secondary actually played a lot better than what I thought they were going to do. I thought they were going to have a lot of trouble with our receivers. But you know what? If the offensive line can't allow Goff to have the time to look, then you know what? It's going to have problems, which is exactly what happened. So when the offensive line doesn't give Goff the time to, fully survey all of those deeper routes, those mid-level routes, hey, it's going to be a problem. So yeah, that is where all of this offensive problem starts from. The offensive line simply did not execute to the level that us Lions fans are accustomed to seeing over the last couple of years. Now, when you talk about the defense, on the other hand, that's a little bit different of a kettle of fish. And the reason why is because I know everybody wants to instantaneously, they're going to want to go after the pass rush. I know they are because of exactly the last couple of things that have happened over the last couple of days. What happened in terms of, Dan Campbell was asked why the Lions didn't go after Zadarius Smith and saying, we're good. Those 2 words are going to live in infamy with a lot of Lions fans because they're going to be like, oh, you said we're good. And now when we go out and we play, we don't even get a sack on Jordan Love, and Jordan Love and the Packers' offensive, passing attack absolutely shreds us to pieces. But I'm going to tell you this right now. Again, you have to take a look at everything for what it truly is. The Lions' pass rush was not a problem yesterday in terms of the fact that, they had chances to get sacks throughout the entirety of the game and they just didn't execute. Sure, they had chances to get sacks. There were a couple of chances they had to get sacks. But you also have to take a look at what the Packers did offensively to negate that. They were doubling freaking Hutchinson all the damn time. They were making sure that our edge rushers were constantly getting extra attention to negate that pass rush. And let's think about this. Not only were the Packers' offensive linemen doing their job well in that, but I'm going to tell you this right now. If I had the ability to sit down and watch the majority of that game all over again, like the Lions offensive coaches and defensive coaches are going to do with the players, most of those throws that Jordan Love made were quick throws. Less than 2.5 seconds. Why? Because the Packers figured out and the Packers realized and figured out very quickly that, hey, what's the best way to completely negate Aiden Hutchinson? What's the best way to completely negate a pass rush? It's to get the ball out quickly. It's to do something to get the ball out further quickly from Jordan Love's hands into the hands of the receivers. That's exactly what happened. On the majority of those plays, that is exactly what the Packers did. Now, yes, the Packers did take some deep shots. They completed those deep shots. But that's not on the pass rush fully. That's also on the defensive secondary not doing their job. And again, that's probably where I have the most disappointment, is because from all the reports that we had heard coming out of training camp and coming out of the offseason was that this defensive secondary was playing very, very sticky coverage. Yesterday's game against the Packers, we didn't see that at all. That was not there. Now again, that comes down to the Lions secondary not executing well. But it also comes down to the fact that Matt LaFleur, being the offensive coach that he is, he used the pieces that he had offensively to get those receivers to execute at a high level against our secondary. Because there were several times that I noticed how the Packers were using, screens, they were using pick plays, they were using different ways to get their receivers open against our secondary. So again, you have to take all this information and you have to put it all together. You can't just simply say, oh, well, you know what, we just look terrible and that's the end of it. Okay, yeah, you're right, we didn't look good. But why did we not look good? Was it just because the players performed badly? Or is it because, hey, the opposing team did something really, really well and our team did not, respond or react the correct way to actually make sure that they were in a better position to absolutely execute? And when we're going to break it down, we're going to be honest with ourselves and call a spade, that is more likely what happened. And that is exactly what happened, more than just, oh, you know what, the players just sucked. The coaches just didn't put them in a place to execute. No. The coaches put the players where they needed to be. The players simply did not execute. They were not locked in. They didn't play with the same energy. They didn't play with the same drive that the Packers had. And I'm going to tell you exactly why that was the case. The Packers had lost to the Lions the last 3 times at Lambeau. I guarantee you this, Matt LaFleur all week had made sure that was the one thing that the Packers probably kept hearing was like, listen, we do not want to have a 4th year in a row where the Lions come into our home field and they beat us. The Packers were solely focused on making sure that the Lions did not come into Lambeau and win for a 4th straight year. And I'm telling you this right now, Matt LaFleur made sure that the Packers were in the right mindset, they had the right energy, they had the right viewpoint about how they were going to execute to get the win, and that's exactly what they did. The Lions simply just did not do what they needed to do. And when you take a look at it from that perspective, it goes back to exactly what Coach Campbell said after the game. It goes back to what the players said after the game. They did not play with the right mindset. They did not play with the right energy because they didn't execute. I've said this before, and I'm probably going to say it more times over the course of this season than I'm ever going to care to want to repeat in my life again. But the coaches can put out the best game plan you can possibly imagine. What ultimately it comes down to is the players have to execute it. They have to execute it. Everybody's going to talk about how the offense didn't get a whole lot during all the plays that they ran. Because if I recall correctly, I think I read somewhere the Lions only got 3.7 yards on average per play, which is the lowest they have had per play since going back to the 2021 season, early 2022 season. So everybody's going to say, oh, well, this proves that Ben Johnson was a better offensive play caller. This is going to prove that John Morton's not up to the task. Wait a minute, back up here just for half a damn second. When we first started out with Ben Johnson, we went 1-6. Our offense was also not necessarily doing the greatest. Yeah, our offense did a lot better in a lot of those games than what we saw yesterday. But the reason why our offense wasn't playing well wasn't necessarily because, oh, you know what? We weren't always executing at the right level. It was also because, hey, we also had a defense that wasn't helping us out a whole lot. Again, the defense, the reason why it was having problems was, again, it didn't execute. The talent is clearly there. The talent is there on both sides of the ball, but in order for that talent to fully show up and manifest itself out on the field, you have to have the players executing at the right level and at the right spots. When you have one player that doesn't execute and misses something, that's going to open up opportunities for the opposing team to take advantage. And that's exactly what the Packers did. If you actually execute and everybody does their job the way they're supposed to, it allows your team a better chance of success. That's what happened yesterday. The Lions did not execute, the Packers did. That's why the Packers were able to win that game. It wasn't because the Packers were just way better than the Lions. The Packers executed way better than the Lions. That's what happened. That was the result. Anybody that wants to argue differently, they did not watch that game and actually walk away with the actual correct perception that comes from that game. Because you take a look at what the Lions players and the Lions coaches said, it's like, yeah, we just didn't do our jobs correctly. We didn't do our jobs well enough. It's not because they were absolutely outperformed because of talent. They were outperformed because they didn't execute to the same level. Because I'm going to tell you this right now. We've seen lesser teams with lesser talent execute perfectly and beat some really great teams. That's what it ultimately comes down to. If you can execute your game plan better than another team, you will be surprised how often lesser teams will sometimes beat really great teams because those great teams don't execute to the same level. That's what happened. The Lions came out and they didn't execute the way they're supposed to. That's the reason we lost. Anybody that wants to argue it, go back and watch the tape. You'll find very, very quickly why what I'm saying is correct. You'll find out very quickly that's why the Lions players and coaches are saying, yeah, there's no reason to worry. We just simply didn't execute to the level that we know we have to. I know a lot of Lions fans aren't going to want to hear that, and I know a lot of Lions fans are going to want to argue with me. You know what? That's part of being a podcaster. I'm going to have to deal with some angry fans. I'm going to have to deal with some people that aren't going to like what I have to say. So be it. But anyway, folks, I've reached the end of this episode. I'm probably going to release another one today. Going to talk more about this game because there's a lot to talk about from multiple different perspectives. But anyway, having said that, I'm going to end this episode and say thank you all for watching yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. I also encourage y'all please to do this. If you like the content and you've not yet subscribed, I hope to gain your subscription. But if you subscribed in the past and you forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and you've not yet had a chance to do so, please, I want to also highly encourage y'all, make sure you hit that bell notification icon so you guys never miss any more content that I push out. Hope y'all are doing well. Hope y'all got something in your life that makes you happy, makes you smile. God bless, my friends. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.